Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Andrew Johnson, council member, calling this regularly scheduled meeting of Zoning and Planning Committee to order. With me today, I'm joined by council members Reich, Goodman, and Warsami, and we are expecting Council President Johnson and Chair of this committee, Lisa Bender, very shortly. Today, we do have two public hearings on our agenda, along with several consent items, and we'll just get right to it and start with our public hearings. So first up, we have 2000 Fremont Avenue South, considering an appeal filed by Joel Fisher on the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustments denying the application for a variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio of a new home. And first up, we'll have staff present.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Johnson and committee members. My name is Joe Giants, and I'm a city planner in zoning administration. I'm here to present statements of fact and staff recommendation for the variance application of 2000 Fremont Avenue South in the R2B two-family zoning district. This variance would allow an increase in the maximum floor area ratio for a single-family home from 0.5 to 0.54. This variance was first heard at the December 11th hearing of the Board of Adjustment. The board voted 7-1 to deny the variance. The applicant has appealed the decision of the board and has prepared a statement of appeal outlining why they feel the board erred in its judgment. Plans have not changed since staff initially reviewed them, so the planning staff is still recommending denial of this variance. 2000 Fremont Avenue South is currently a vacant lot located on the southwest corner of Franklin and Fremont Avenue South in the Lowry Hill neighborhood, 5 blocks east of Lake of the Isles, 3 blocks west of Hennepin. Other properties on the south side of Franklin, predominantly single-family homes that embody quintessential Minneapolis architecture, open front porches, traditional design, pitched roofs with half stories beneath, and detached garages. Homes on the north side of Franklin are more varied in their architectural style and land use, a lot of apartments, duplexes, triplexes. Now, just so we're all on the same page, this variance does revolve around floor area ratio, or FAR. FAR is one of the primary ways that we measure building bulk in Minneapolis. It's found by dividing the gross floor area of the structure by the lot area. So just to illustrate quickly, a one-story building that occupied an entire zoning lot would have an FAR of 1 because the gross floor area would equal the lot area. Likewise, a two-story building that occupied half of the lot would also have an FAR of 1 because the two stories added together would still equal the lot area. The maximum floor area ratio for a single-family home in the city of Minneapolis is 0.5. The applicant proposes to construct a single-family home with an attached garage. This is a rendering of the proposed home. The FAR of the proposed home is 0.54. Thus, the applicant has applied for a variance to increase the maximum FAR of a single-family home from 0.5 to 0.54. This translates to approximately 250 feet of excess floor area. Since the board decision, the planning staff has not received any additional public commentary, but before the board decision, the planning staff did receive several letters of support for the variance, including letters of support from several adjacent neighbors. The Lowry Hill Neighborhood Association also offered their support of the variance. So when evaluating variances, public comments can certainly provide guidance, but according to city and state law, a variance may only be granted if 3 required findings are met. First, in order for a variance to be granted, a practical difficulty must exist because of circumstances unique to the property. The circumstances cannot have been created by the applicant, and they can't be based entirely upon economic considerations. The planning staff finds that no practical difficulty exists that will prevent the applicant from constructing a home entirely within the parameters of the zoning ordinance. At the board meeting, one of the board members stated, "New construction is a clean slate. A way can be found to follow the rules." Now, that statement is overly broad in that every single property does have certain unique characteristics, but the question becomes, at what point do those unique characteristics constitute a practical difficulty? The most notable characteristic of this lot is an 8-foot grade change from the front lot line to the rear lot line. Now, a lot of times, an 8-foot grade change could absolutely constitute a practical difficulty. It would depend upon where on the property the grade change occurred, and perhaps how steeply it occurred. This is an elevation view of the house as seen from Franklin. The white dashed line indicates the level of the first floor. It's evident from the house plans that this grade change did not have a notable effect on the design of the house. The floor of the garage and the floor of the house are only about a foot apart, so it's difficult to use slope. The slope of the site is a practical difficulty when the effect of the slope on the design is minimal. In regards to other aspects of the lot, the front yard setback is approximately 33 feet. Now, this is 13 feet deeper than a traditional, or the minimum setback in this zoning district, but it's the same front yard setback exhibited by every single house on that block, so you can't say that that's particularly unique. It is on the corners, so it has a larger corner side yard setback. It's 8 feet instead of the required 6 feet for an interior lot. The house is set back 11 feet from the corner, so this isn't applicable here. So for variance finding 2, in addition to a practical difficulty, in order for a variance to lawfully be granted, the applicant must use the property in a reasonable manner that's in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. So 2 parts here. Is it a reasonable request, and is it in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance? The applicant wants to construct a single-family home in a low-density residential zoning district. The use is permitted in the district and prevalent in the surrounding area. Staff finds that this is absolutely a reasonable use of the property. Second, is the use in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance? The house would exceed the allowable floor area by about 250 square feet. This figure is not an arbitrary number. Prior to October 1st, 2014, applicants were allowed to deduct 250 square feet of gross floor area if the property contained an attached garage. So what that means is if the applicant had submitted their home plans prior to October 1st, this house would have been approvable. This design was, it was clearly designed under the old code provisions. So this particular ordinance change was part of a comprehensive text amendment that refined many of the zoning code or zoning ordinance pertaining to single-family homes. One of the primary goals, intents of this ordinance was to encourage homes that were more context-sensitive, homes that better fit into their surroundings. This particular provision that allowed builders to deduct 250 square feet was specifically removed to reduce building bulk, to remove long blank walls, to preserve lines of sight through adjacent backyards, and to preserve traditional patterns of development. Single-family homes in Lowry Hill embody quintessential Minneapolis architecture. At nearly 80 feet long, the proposed home is nearly twice as long as many other homes on the block. This is the situation that this ordinance change was specifically enacted to address. As such, staff finds that this request is not in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Third, in order for a variance to lawfully be granted, the proposed variance must not alter the essential character of the locality or be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the vicinity. In all respects besides FAR, this home meets zoning requirements. If the garage and the house were separated, the house would no longer exceed the FAR because detached garages are not included in the FAR calculation. So interestingly, if the garage and the house were separated, both the garage and the house could be built larger than proposed because the garage could be built to a maximum 676 square feet of floor area. It's currently around 520. And the house could be enlarged by about 200 square feet, which would be the leftover from the garage. So this arrangement would still create more building bulk. However, separating the structures would still fit the prevailing pattern of development better than the proposed design. This house demonstrates that a well-articulated quality facade still imparts a very strong visual impact when the house itself is more than 80 feet long. Separating the structures may result in overall bulk, but the bulk is broken up into more manageable parts. So as far as neighborhood character, Lowry Hill contains many large, old homes on average-sized lots. Consequently, many of the existing homes do currently exceed the maximum FAR. So it's very possible that a new home that was being built in certain areas of the city, even if it was built to the maximum FAR, may appear small by comparison if it was surrounded by homes that did exceed the FAR. For instances like this, not only in Lowry Hill, but citywide, there's a provision written into the zoning code that allows applicants to increase the maximum allowed FAR for a single-family home if a majority of the homes within 100 feet of the subject property exceed the FAR. This provision is conducted administratively without a variance, and it helps to ensure that new homes match the scale and character of existing homes. At the subject property, a majority of the single-family homes and two-family homes within 100 feet of the site do not exceed the maximum FAR. It's worth noting that many of these homes are 2.5 stories and do contain half stories, which do contain a significant amount of habitable floor area, but half stories are not included in our measurement of FAR. So this administrative increase is a tool that was implemented to allow context sensitivity. At the subject property, it can't be applied, so staff cannot find that the proposed home matches the character of the locality. So in conclusion, because the proposed home does not meet the 3 required findings that are required to approve a variance, CPED staff again recommends that this request for a variance be denied. And thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, I should say I'm Lisa Bender. Sorry I'm late. I chair the committee, and we are also joined by Council President Johnson. We were coming from another event this morning. Okay, so with that, we will, seeing no questions, open the public hearing for this item.
Hello, I'm Joel Fisher and reside at 221 First Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis. My wife and I are the owners of the property at 2000 Fremont Avenue. First of all, would like to thank you for the opportunity to appeal the decision that the Board of Adjustments made last month. As Mr. Giant said, we're requesting a variance to increase the FAR from 0.5 to 0.54. My wife and I acquired the property in February 2013. It was our intention to build a single-family home on this lot where we would reside, raise our family, and live here for the foreseeable future. The reason why we fell in love with this particular property is because, one, it's in a great neighborhood with great schools. It has great access to public transportation, and it also has it's close in proximity to commercial districts where one can walk to get whatever they need. Location is very important to us because I have an eye disease, so with that, I'm legally blind and cannot drive. So access to transportation that can get me to and from work, can run to a store if I need anything, at the drop of a hat is very important to us. So with that, location is maybe more important to us than the average person, and this lot was great for us. The opportunity to have a lot where we could build something new was also very appealing because it allows us to build and design something that fits our physical needs. With the eye disease, there are some needs within the house and the overall landscape of the lot that is important to us, especially when we're thinking for the long term. Our proposal was for a single-family home, 2-story, approximately 1,350 square feet on the first floor, 1,450 square feet approximately on the second floor, and an attached garage. The key there being the attached garage because it's going to limit any traffic for me from an outside garage to a house, potentially in miserable conditions, kind of like today, or in darkness. Because one thing is, there's no cure for the eye disease that I have, and there's also no certainty that it couldn't get worse over the years. It's also hereditary, so there's potential that it could impact our children. So with that being said, we intentionally designed the home with an attached garage. As Joe noted, the lot is approximately 6,100 square feet. And when we initially designed this in late 2013, 2014, it fit the FAR requirements. We understand that we're coming and joining someone else's neighborhood. So we were very deliberate in what we designed, how we designed it, and also how we communicate this process to our neighbors. Because Given the fact that we want to be here for the long term, we want to make sure that we fit in terms of the look and feel of the house, as well as just with our neighbors. I mean, it's the people that we're going to live with for the next, hopefully, 30 some odd years. Now, Joe mentioned that the pitch of the lot is, it does slope down from the rear of the lot, from the alley towards the front. And there is an 8-foot difference between the front and the rear property lines. That 8-foot difference in our mind does create a practical difficulty for us, in the sense that if we are to detach the garage, there will be steps down from the outside, from the garage to the interior of the house. And that will cause problems for us in the long term. And so not only for me, but potentially for our children if they inherit what I have. So therefore, we deliberately designed the house with an attached garage. Now, we understand that we want to fit with the essential character of the neighborhood, and our intent was to fit with the spirit of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan of the city. We know that our lot is on a highly trafficked intersection within the Lowry Hill neighborhood. And so we want this to be appealing from all angles, whether you're coming down from Franklin from an elevated position towards Fremont, or whether you're coming towards the lake. We want it to be appealing from all angles. And we understand that there was the recent zoning code change in October, and that code, was intended to regulate bulk. It was intended to make sure that there aren't, that we avoid long blank walls that aren't visually appealing, and that it preserves the traditional development character throughout Minneapolis. Now, not even knowing that this change would have occurred, because we began to design this home at the beginning of 2013, we were deliberate in our design to make sure that, one, we didn't make it look like a bulky, boxy home on a highly trafficked corner. Given that there's an attached garage, we made sure that the height of that garage is much lower than the height of the home, so that when you're coming from the elevated position coming down, it softens the look and feel of the home. So we were deliberate in our design and our intent well before this, this change came into place. In terms of avoiding long blank walls, we addressed this in two fashions. First, we tried to add as many windows as possible to the exterior of the home along Franklin Avenue. One, it allows more light into the home. That's very helpful for somebody with a visual impairment. Two, it softens the look and feel of the facade, which helps avoid long blank walls. And we also changed the width of the home throughout, an added dimension, so that it's not just one long rectangular home on a corner that's not appealing and looks like a big bulky home. We understand that it's longer than other homes because of the attached garage. But keeping that in mind, the home, or I should say the multifamily property just to the north, I believe it's 1938 Fremont Avenue, is a multifamily 3-story building that's approximately the same length as our home. It's taller, it's a rectangle. In terms of bulk, it has more perceived bulk than our design. In addition to that, the home, or the property diagonal from us, is a multifamily building, 4 stories, still approximately the same length. So that definitely has more bulk, perceived bulk, than what our home has. So we've tried to address both the perception of bulk, the avoidance of long blank walls, which these other properties have. Now, We also tried to, in everything we did in the design phase, to fit in with the neighborhood. We don't want to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. We want to fit in and have somebody look at it and say, wow, this home fits in, even though it's 100 years younger than the surrounding homes. And so we deliberately designed it with an elevated front porch, as all the homes on our property do. And we also had it wrap around so that it's appealing from both sides. In addition, we intend to have it similar colors, similar architectural style, and use similar materials to the homes around it, because our number one goal is to fit in with the neighborhood. So with that being said, we understand that that we need to fit with the spirit of the ordinance as well, and the change that's occurred. And Joe mentioned that without even requesting a variance, there is the potential to increase the size of the garage, increase the size of the home, given the additional 250 square foot additional space. And we could even add a half story to this, which nearly all of the homes around us have. We don't want to do that because we feel like that creates more bulk than the design that we have. Joe mentioned, given the established front setback, as well as if we are to detach our garage, we'd likely position it so the garage would face towards the alley, which would then bring the garage in 5 feet from the rear, and having an increased setback on the side yard because it's on a corner. It really puts constraints on the lot in such that if we were to build a home having to detach it, we likely would be forced to have a long rectangular home with no dimension that's likely going to be taller than what's currently proposed. And we feel that that offers more bulk, perceived bulk, and quite frankly doesn't fit with the spirit of the ordinance in trying to maintain that and fit in not having these bulky homes within Minneapolis. Now we feel that our proposed development fits in terms of the use, the intended use of the property. We don't feel that it alters the essential character of the neighborhood. It won't be injurious to any of the surrounding properties or use of the surrounding properties, and won't impact the health or safety of others within the neighborhood. As I've mentioned all along, we want to fit in with the neighborhood. We've talked to them day one when we bought the property. We told them why we bought the property, the fact that it's going to be our long-term home, the reasons why, the proximity, and the needs that we have given my eye condition, and they've all been very supportive. Throughout this process, when we realized that we needed a variance, we did reach out to the Lowry Hill Neighborhood Association to get their feedback and their support, because we don't want to develop something that they don't want. Now, we were a little concerned when we heard their typical stance is to not go on record supporting any variances. Rather, they'll simply state, we don't oppose it. So we met with the Lowry Hill Neighborhood Association in November, invited all of our neighbors to the meeting, many of which did attend, and we're very thankful for the support of the Neighborhood Association. This lot has a checkered history, and they are very excited to have us join the neighborhood. And with that, they did go on record formally supporting our plans and our request for a variance to increase the FAR. Since then, we have received 5 letters of support in favor of the variance increase. Those letters of support include the 2 properties adjacent to us to the south, It includes the property adjacent to us to the west across the alley, so they're 2001 Girard. It includes the multifamily property to the north of us, just across Franklin Avenue, as well as another resident on the 1900 block of Fremont Avenue. So we're very thankful to have their support, and quite frankly, the design and what we're proposing here impacts them the most. And they're being very outspoken and saying, we like what you've designed and we want you to come join our neighborhood. So we've heard throughout this process that, frankly, this level of support is unique. And in most cases, you hear opposition to variances. So I think that's a testament that we are fitting in with the spirit of what should be built there. And we're not going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood, as evidenced by the people around us, as well as we're not going to impact their health, their safety, because of what we have proposed. So with that, we would like you to consider this appeal to the variance decision and understand that this is something that we want for the long term and that there are unique situations here in terms of both the lot as well as the physical challenges that our family faces. And I hope you can appreciate that and understand that, you know, we want to join this neighborhood and want to fit in with the neighborhood as best as possible.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for the appellant or their architect? Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak in the public hearing? Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to grant the appeal and direct staff to draft findings of fact. And I'm happy to speak to this if you'd like me to, but I guess I'll wait and see if there's any opposition.
Sure. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If you want to briefly comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will note this lot has been an issue in the 7th Ward since the day I took office in 1998. At that time, there were 2 homes on the same lot, one of which was a problem property and had a number of illegal changes to it over a long period of time. There was a lot of discussion at that point about solving the problems on that property by attaching the 2 homes that were existing in order to make it a single-family home. This has been 17 years of drama in this neighborhood, and I think this is an amazing solution. If anyone knows this area, they would know that immediately adjacent to this, to the north, there are 2 basically apartment buildings, condos, that are 3 and 4 stories tall, directly next to it. I mean, yes, there's a single family home across the street, but across the street in the opposite direction, there's a 3-story building, then a 4-story building with 3 and 4 more units in each. So this is actually a very good transition from the multifamily, more dense buildings that look a lot like this, except for they're a lot bigger in terms of mass, and the single family homes that are also quite large on fairly large lots immediately to the south. So this seems to me to be a very good solution. It fits within the character of the neighborhood, and I will say in my world, most of the time people oppose variances to make homes larger unless they fit the character pretty specifically. It's unusual for the neighborhood association to actually take a position. Normally they say they don't object, and the neighbors adjacent would probably prefer to have a nice empty grassy lot next to them rather than a fairly substantial home, and they support it as well. But regardless of the neighbors' support, there are clearly practical difficulties on this lot and for these applicants, and this is a no-brainer. We should for sure grant this appeal and draft findings to support it.
All right, are there any other comments or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. So we're going to just shift things around. We have a couple of HPC commissioners here, so I want to move to the consent agenda so that they can go along with their day here. We will move to items 3, 4, 5, and 6 quickly before returning to the second public hearing. Thanks for the patience of the folks who are here for that. So on our consent agenda, we have item number 3, which is appointments to our Heritage Preservation Commission. We have 3 appointments, Dan Olson, who is from Ward 6, Linda Mack, who is in the 7th Ward, and Constance Vork, who is in the 5th Ward. 2 of these are reappointments, and then Mr. Olson is joining the HPC. I had the opportunity to be in these interviews and was so impressed by our applicants. We are well served. Item number 4 is Minneapolis Arts Commission appointments. Item number 5 is staff referral for ordinance related to our homeless shelter zoning. And item number 6 is staff referral for an ordinance amending our zoning code related to public art funding in Minneapolis. Is there any discussion on any of the consent items? Seeing none, I will see if either Mr. Olson or Ms. Vork would like to say anything before we vote on the appointment to the HPC.
Yes, thank you for the appointment, and I'm excited to be on the commission. Lived in Ward 6 for 17 years in that 1890s brownstone, and I'm a planner by trade, so I'm very familiar with city processes and this development review type thing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Constance Vork, and I'm very excited to be reappointed. I've enjoyed filling out past Commissioner Tammy Lindbergh's term on the HPC. It's been a very enjoyable experience, and so I thank you for the reappointment.
Thank you. And Ms. Mack is not here, but is such an impressive addition or continuation on the HPC as well. So with that, I will move the consent items 3 through 6. Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair, then on item 5, excuse me. So we're referring to staff. Tell me about the process on this. I guess is I want to understand where we're going with this.
Sure, I am. So I'm the ordinance author along with Councilmember Gordon on this, so I can speak to that, but I'd also ask staff to chime in. This is staff referral. Subject matter introduction was given at the last council meeting, so this is just beginning the process. I can say that I was approached by 2 homeless shelters that operate in the 10th Ward who are having some issues with the way we currently regulate homeless shelters, which is that we require them outside of downtown to be physically adjacent to religious institutions. And they're having some issues with the religious institutions that they're attached to, with their leases and with the congregation's viability. And so this is looking at ways to again, knowing that this is a complicated issue with long history, understand if there's a way that we can relook at how we are physically regulating the location of homeless shelters in the city, and potentially not only requiring them to be physically adjacent to religious institutions. And I can point to staff to talk about a process that we might follow. We've just begun speaking with the CPED staff person who'll be working on this. So if Mr. Wittenberg wants to add anything.
Thank you, Chair Bender. Council President Johnson, that's right. Our only real preconceived notion going into this, looking at this issue, is that we do regulate overnight shelters in a very unusual way relative to other peer cities in requiring that they be associated with a religious institution, place of assembly. So that, I think, is what we know we really want to take a look at, is whether we should be decoupling that. We anticipate putting together a steering committee of stakeholders. There's not a particular timeline other than to certainly bring something forward to the council this year before next fall. But that's kind of the main impetus is the restriction of having to be associated with a religious institution currently.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? say nay, and that carries. All right, returning then to our public hearings, we have item number 2, which is considering an appeal filed on behalf of McDonald's for a decision at the Zoning Board of Adjustment related to signs at the McDonald's there on University Avenue Northeast.
Morning, Chair Bender, committee members. Again, the subject before you is an appeal of the Board of Adjustments item, or their decision upholding the zoning administrator's decision of determining grade regarding to the measurement of sign height located at the property 1100 and 1118 University Avenue Northeast. The Board of Adjustment heard this item on December 11th and denied all 3 of the appeals. The appeals were 2 menu board signs, 2 order here signs, and the drive-through gateway sign. A little background on this. The Zoning Board of Adjustments heard 4 variance applications for 4 signs in February 20th of 2014. The actions are included in the packet, but to summarize, 3 of the 4 variances were granted. The only variance that was not granted was to the menu board. The menu boards are held to the 6-foot standard as required by code. The order here signs were approved from 8 feet to 10-foot 3, and the gateway drive-through sign was approved from 8 feet to 10 feet 9 inches. An inspection on site revealed both menu boards, both order here signs, and the gateway drive-through sign to be above the maximum permitted height. The menu boards, again, are permitted at 6 feet in height and were measured both at just over 7 feet. The order here signs were permitted at 10-foot 3 and were measured at 10-foot 8 inches. And the drive-through gateway sign was again permitted at 10-foot 9 and was measured at 11 feet 7 inches. Chapter 54380 addresses the computation of sign height, and it states the sign height shall be calculated from a vertical distance from natural grade measured at a point either at curb level or 10 feet away from the middle of the sign. And again, that does state natural grade, and 520-160 in the zoning code defines natural grade as the grade of the site before it's modified by moving earth, adding or removing fill, or installing other earthwork features. So for this site, obviously McDonald's has manipulated grade over the years. So we're looking at grade before this most recent construction. The natural grade with this, the applicant did state that very little work was done to the driveway and drive-through during construction. Thus, it's easy to say that the natural grade on site is the grade that's still present. With this and Code 54380's determination stating that sign height should be used, or sign height should be measured with natural grade as opposed from grade, this puts sign height measured from the driveway to the top of the sign. Using natural grade is essential in regulating sign height. Relying on grade alone incentivizes the addition of fill to increase grade, thus achieving a higher sign height. Natural grade keeps heights consistent and in character with the area. Staff finds that the determination of the zoning administrator in natural grade, as well as the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustments to uphold their decision, accurate and consistent.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Didn't we discuss this already in this committee, the signs at McDonald's? And if so, why are we back discussing it again? And if this seems to me to be kind of taking advantage of the process here, maybe we should go back and look at the approvals we've already granted them and revoke those too. I mean, I feel like they had a deal. They said they had a deal with the neighborhood. Please refresh me as to why we're back at this again.
Again, they went to the Board of Adjustments. They were issued 3 of the 4 variances. Staff measured the height of those, and it is in violation. We issued a stop work order because of that, and there's been an appeal of the stop work order based on the determination of grade.
And I think, yeah.
Chairman Bender, Councilmember Goodman, I believe that it sounds familiar because on the original approvals, they were appealed. So they were denied a variance, they appealed it, they were denied that, I think is the record.
Mr. Wittenberg might remember.
Sure. My recollection, Chair Bender and committee members, is that there had been an appeal filed, but then an agreement was reached with the neighborhood and that appeal was subsequently withdrawn. So my recollection is that that issue never made it to this committee previously.
So thank you, Mr. Wittenberg, Mr. Poor. So they worked out a deal with the neighborhood, and now they're violating the deal with the neighborhood, and now they're questioning whether or not our staff are doing their job correctly to enforce the ordinance. Is that essentially what's happening?
Yeah, Chairman Bender, Councilmember Goodman, the appellant can speak for themselves. They don't think we're measuring it right. They think they installed what was approved and they've appealed the way that we're measuring it. So that's what it is. They just don't think we're interpreting the approvals correctly, and that's what their appeal is. They think they built what they were approved for. We take a different position.
I assume the neighbors would as well.
Mr. Port, or staff, just while we're asking, could you remind us again the difference, though, in the measurements that you're seeing? It's not like a ½ inch or something.
I'll just go through each of the signs. Both menu boards are permitted at a maximum height of 6 feet. Both have been measured slightly over 7 feet. 7.04 on the first one, 7.05 on the second. Both order here signs are permitted at 10 feet 3 inches. Both have been measured at 10 feet 8 inches. The drive-through gateway sign is permitted at 10 feet 9 inches and was measured at 11 feet 7 inches.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. So was the allowance at the height that we gave them what was allowed under the code, or did they get a variance for that even?
Yes, those 3 had variances issued. The height for freestanding signs would have been 8 feet, but it was increased to 10 feet 3 and 10 foot 9 respectively.
Right. Mr. Nilsson, do we have any ability to go back and say you need to build it to 8 feet then? I mean, essentially we gave them a variance to build it to 10. They totally took advantage of it and built it even taller. Why don't we go back and say, nope, now you got to follow the code exactly?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, sorry, I'm not sure I followed the question, but they were granted certain variances, denied others. They attempted to appeal the denied variances, and that was ultimately withdrawn. So the code applies to the denied variances, the code regulations in general, and the amount they were granted per the variances applies. So it is, as Mr. Liska notes, for the freestanding signs, they are allowed 10 feet 3 inches and 10 feet 9 inches.
But they were allowed that based on a variance they got.
Correct.
But then they didn't follow the rules and they built
Correct.
it even bigger.
So
my question is, can we go back and order them to now not build anything taller than what is strictly allowed under the code?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, there is no mechanism to revoke a variance per se. We have enforcement options that exist for noncompliance with approvals or with the code in general, and that would include administrative citations, potential criminal prosecution, as ridiculous as that might sound for this, and other things. And this is really the first step of the enforcement action, because due process requires that the zoning administrator and zoning enforcement first issue an order of violation, allowing them time to correct. And that is what they've appealed. Essentially, the zoning administrator's determination is that they are not in compliance with the approved height. And so this appeal then will address that issue. If they remain non-compliant, then we would have all our enforcement tools, which would include escalating administrative citations, again, potential criminal prosecution, as long as they remain non-compliant.
But we don't have the ability to go back and say, we gave you a break and you took advantage of it, and now we aren't going to give you that break either.
No, there would be no recourse, again, to revoke a variance right now.
So I think about that last appeal we just had. So if they came in and they got a variance for FAR and they built an even bigger house, we wouldn't do much about it. So we have to be very careful and trusting that people actually follow the rules.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Good, you're right. You know, again, you can use your enforcement tools, and that could include reverting construction to bring it into compliance. Granted, with a large expense of a house, that might be a different conversation than signage.
Well, I guess individual homeowners probably don't have the wherewithal of big corporations and fancy lawyers.
Mr. Porter, did you want to comment? We've been through this together this past
Chairman
year.
Bender, Councilmember Goodman. I think in one scenario is if they don't actually build what they are approved for the variance for and it goes past a year, you could argue they never vested their rights on the variance, but there is no mechanism to revoke a variance. You can revoke a conditional use permit, you can revoke a site plan, but you cannot revoke a variance.
We have, though, required people to tear down buildings that they've built improperly, not within their approvals.
No, that's certainly correct, is that there's actions that can be taken to make corrective changes. Mm-hmm.
Are there any further questions for staff before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing, and why don't we start with the appellant, with the applicant, and then hear from the appellant.
Appellant. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Darren Lazan. I'm with Landform Professional Services. I'm not a fancy attorney. I'm a civil engineering and design firm right here in Minneapolis. I represent McDonald's USA LLC, the applicant on the item before you tonight. And I can see we're off to a good start already this morning. I want to make a couple quick clarifications. This item was before this committee. This item was before this committee when the residents appealed the Zoning Board of Adjustments award of our variances. We did not appeal those. So it came before you, you heard this, you granted their appeal, at which time we stepped back, asked the item be tabled before it went to council, met with the residents and worked through an agreement. So this went to, our original approvals went to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. The variances but one were granted. We adjusted our plans to meet the denial of that one variance, and then the neighbors appealed and brought it to you. You acted on that item, and that's why you're familiar with this one. I want to give a little bit of background, and again, I could probably take all day with the level of detail we have on this, and I won't. But I do have all the resources here. If I would respectfully ask that reserve some time to respond, because we do tend, there's so much detail here, we do tend to get lost in the weeds a little bit and move forward on decision making before the facts are out. So I don't want to bore you with an hour and a half of monologue on the facts here. I want to skip to it, make our case, but if it does get in the weeds, I'd reserve that opportunity. Site at University and Broadway is was part of the originally 2013, I believe, major remodel program or MRP program, which involved, after 20 years of operation, this original store was reconstructed. After 20 additional years, it was pretty tired and it was time for an upgrade, and it got put on the program for a major remodel. So roughly $1.1 million was improved. Improvement was made in the neighborhood to improve the full exterior, some work inside, complete remodel inside, and site work along with the drive-throughs that are the question before you today. Along with that project, there's roughly $150,000 in additions to this project after our project was fully approved. That's the agreement we had with the neighbors to work through some of those issues. Roughly $150,000 was added to the agreement as part of that. It has, by many accounts, been one of the nicest rehabs of a commercial property in the neighborhood. We drove it again yesterday looking at several others, and quite a bit of money and time and energy was spent on this rehab. I think we're here, and I know we're here, essentially because this is a commercial piece of property, zoned, guided, taxed, and so forth, at the intersection of two state highways. And that's something in an urban environment. And that's something the neighbors struggle to accept. And I'm not sure, as much as I like the neighbors, I've worked with them for a year now, good people, I don't know that we'll ever be considered a good neighbor in their mind because their expectation can't be met by a commercial property. It's just too high. The question today is related to staff went through. The 5 signs. There's 2 menu boards. This is a night shot, I apologize, but there's 2 menu boards in the background, 2 order here or gateway signs, order here or COD signs they're called, and 1 gateway sign, which is the clearance sign in the foreground. And just for as a side fact, the lettering that made these signs was at the top of these two components has been removed since the stop work order. So both the taller components, the 3 taller components, are no longer signs, no longer non-compliant. We would like your ruling today to allow us to put the order here information back on. You can see this is before the letters were removed. Across the top it says order here, and there's another similar piece of text here that says enter here as well. We'd like to put those back on, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Those 3 taller structures stay as they are. They're no longer signs. So today, really, we're here to talk about the menu boards and that component. And just by way of reference, again, I want to throw this up. This is the previous menu board prior to construction. Roughly 7 feet tall with a 3-foot ad on top, completely non-compliant for a number of years. And as you can see, maybe you can see in this photo, we have gone back to just the standard, simplified, clean menu board in this location. So it is an improvement over what was there previously. The reason that the menu boards are even on this agenda is because it's apparent that staff has rescinded their previous action requiring or ruling that no further enforcement was necessary on the menu boards. We originally had a stop work order. We remedied the 3 larger structures, took the letters down. We had an in writing in hand that there will be no enforcement, the violation is minimal. So we move forward. Staff added the item to our appeal for the menu boards after revoking this. Our original appeal was only for the taller items because we were told that we were in compliance and no further action was going to be necessary. So we're here today to talk about these menu boards because they're the most critical item, obviously. And I want to address a little bit both the neighbors' concerns and overriding statement last hearing and several other times we've heard, and we heard again this morning, that McDonald's doesn't care about the rules, that McDonald's just does what they want anyway, that McDonald's took advantage. And I want to say adamantly that it couldn't be further from the truth. We submitted a fully detailed set of plans, We laid out every single sign we were going to put on the site, the exact dimensions of every single sign, and we submitted that as part of the PDR, as part of the sign package. We detailed the foundation, exactly how high it would stick up out of the ground, how it's connected to the project, or how it's connected to the sign itself. We even detailed the exact configuration of the bolts that get attached to the flange and how that gets configured with the slope of the foundation and where grade falls. All of this was detailed, of course, in a full set of plans that dimensionally showed where all these components are going to sit, and from an elevation perspective, how this fine grading was going to work. Exactly the elevations in here, exactly as laid out in the set of plans. We built exactly what was proposed. We built exactly what we proposed. Of significant importance here is staff wrote the variance language. Staff took our plans. Shanna Sether was our planner. Staff took these plans, wrote the variances, picked the 11 foot 7 inches, 11 foot 9 inches, 6 foot 6 at the time it was denied, or 6 foot 9, it was denied. Those variance numbers came from staff. It was their determination that resulted in those. We built exactly what we proposed. From the first day, beginning of last year, these signs are exactly what we proposed. Now, I said I won't drill into the detail too much, but I'll just give you an idea here. In working through the various correspondence we've had for the last 6 months, really, on this item, we identified 8 distinct different ways to measure sign height in the city of Minneapolis as it relates to this site, whether it's ordinance, correspondence from staff, the variances themselves. Of particular note, the variance language itself, the staff mentioned we had the variances in there. He dropped the word approximate. There's language, specific language in the variance that says we're granted to approximately 11 foot 9 inches. So there's some room in that language written in the variance to give us some flexibility. And that essentially, to come back again, gives us the ability to work through these kind of details where we need to level the sign, we need to put the correct vertical alignment on it. We need to make sure the water drains away from underneath it so it doesn't rust and fall over. That's what we interpreted the approximate. When we went through this process, we looked at what staff prepared for the variance. We looked at the numbers. All of our variants referenced grade, which is a different definition than natural grade. It's a higher elevation. We thought, we confirmed that all of our sign heights as proposed fit under the staff's definition and staff's interpretation, and we moved forward and constructed exactly what we proposed. This is super confusing, but this is essentially a cross-section from the building on this side, through the menu board, through the order sign, through the other menu board, through the other order here sign, and all the dimensions relative to these different measuring points. I have a series of arguments for why all of these make sense and how it can be interpreted. We could go through those all day long, but I won't. What we did internally and what I offer for your consideration today is a very simplified concept for interpreting where these signs be measured from. First, we agree with staff that natural grade should be measured. It's unrealistic, and it's very common in other communities to use some form of natural grade because you don't want someone building a 3-foot berm and putting a 20-foot sign on top of it. We did not modify grade, shown in the green through here. Oops, did I pause? Shown in the green through here, we did not modify grade. Staff confirms in the staff report that there's not significant change to the grade. We agree and would like to have agreement today that natural grade is in fact this green line as it comes through here. Starting at the building, going to the curb that's basically put back at the same place. There's no raised planting beds. The definition of natural grade is a grade at the site before it is modified by moving the earth. I think we agree with staff that that would be this project. So grade before and grade after are the same. We would like to agree that this is natural grade. With that, we take where in the natural grade are we measuring? Staff is currently measuring from the bottom of the drive. The code is pretty clear that it'll be calculated as the vertical distance from the natural grade measured at the point, I'll skip the section that doesn't apply, or at the curb level, or 10 feet, which doesn't necessarily apply. Our argument is, for sake of reasonable interpretation, the natural grade where the sign is installed at the curb is the top of curb. That's 6-inch difference right there, because they're measuring from the bottom of the curb. They're measuring from some point actually out here, but the signs are located adjacent to the curb. Natural grade at the curb, I think it's reasonable to interpret, would be the top of the curb. If you use this definition of natural grade, if you use the top of the curb, this is our worst case scenario, so I picked the highest points in each of these signs. We are 3 inches under, and we could reinstall these letters. This is even better. We are 4 inches over here. We could, I don't know, that foundation got higher in the field when it was installed, but we could drop those letters and stay compliant there and not reinstall those. And the menu boards are roughly 4 inches over to the top of the sign. Now, sign height shall be calculated as the vertical distance from the natural grade measured at a point of blah, 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 to the front sign, whichever is closer, to the uppermost point used in measuring the area of the sign. The sign containers, the boxes that contain the signage, are shown in red. Just like the sign face area of these was interpreted by staff to be the order here, this was the top of the sign, which is why we're measuring to here in this case. This was the sign face area. When we go to the top of the sign face area that was used by staff in determining height or determining area, that's a 5-inch cap and we're under by an inch. So to kind of go back, regroup, and frame, there's roughly a 3-foot difference between the information we've received from staff to date, between grade, quote unquote, as defined, which is the highest, several of these in the middle, and grade at the street, which several of the staff comments noted that it should be used grade at the street. Even at the last December 11th hearing, one of the members of the Board of Adjustments specifically asked if it's correct in assuming the discrepancies in that we're using the curb next to the sign and it should be the curb next to the street. Staff concurred that it should be the curb next to the street, which of course would leave us about a 3-foot menu board, which would be tough to operate under. I think it's also important to note that this site has seen significant review. We've been through the PDR process twice. We've been through a variance process where staff prepared the reports as we outlined. Staff picked the numbers and elevations. Staff interpreted grade and height and everything else and put that application together. We had a number of meetings with the residents as well, but we had a fully detailed sign permit package. Every single sign, every single dimension, every single piece was fully submitted before these were constructed. Not only were they reviewed during the normal permitting process, but a special meeting was held by the zoning staff to review these exact signs and their compliance. And I have the correspondence asking us to wait while they have a special meeting to discuss this. And then the following email that says, yep, we've reviewed it and we've determined that your signs do meet your variance requirements. Then they were constructed. So we've had 5 separate reviews and approvals by city staff. Staff wrote the variances, the notes, and noted that these exact dimensions, these exact heights, these exact signs were consistent with what was installed and elsewhere in the city, not only by us on our other Minneapolis sites, but by other similar uses. And I guess on behalf of the applicant, I'd like to argue at some point, the applicant should be able to rely on staff review, direction, approvals, and written directives. When we're given written directive that our menu board will not require any enforcement, we'd like to rely on that. When we're given a variance based on staff's interpretation at the beginning of the process, we'd like to rely on that. So I think it's reasonable to ask that we, at some point, are allowed to rely. We're not picking some small detail out of a plan set and saying, aha, the building official missed it, we get to be non-compliant. This went through 5 reviews, a specific staff meeting just to address these signs, at which point we were given information that we comply. So currently the COD ladders are down. We'd like to reinstall those. The menu board, I think if you take a reasonable interpretation, is at the 6-foot height, which is what was detailed and constructed, and it is consistent. I want to take just 1 minute to address the agreement with the neighbors, because it is important that we walk through that and understand that, because I'm sure it'll be the topic of the neighbors' concerns when they take the spot. After this group heard this appeal of the neighbors, we did ask Councilmember Fry to table it, and we went to Mr. Fry and said, I don't know that it was the intention of this board to kill $1 million investment in the community, and I'd like to work with the neighbors to come up with a solution that works. We sat down on a number of occasions, went through, and we developed and drafted a memo of understanding outlining those concerns. And Mr. Fry presented this when we came back ultimately to council and took it off the agenda and characterized this as a sterling example of how neighbors and business can work together. This agreement outlines roughly a dozen items that McDonald's will do and 7 items that the residents will do. Without reading the whole agreement to you, I want to point out that we have done, this project is still, let me first say, we did not get a chance to finish construction this fall. November winter hit pretty hard, and some of the plantings didn't get planted. Our site lighting didn't get fine-tuned. Some of our final signage didn't get installed. But with the exception of a couple items, we've complied with the memorandum of understanding, which includes, at the neighbor's request, removing all of the site lighting, not just the 2 poles that were to be replaced prior to our meeting, and construct a new state-of-the-art LED system. That's done. It needs to be tweaked because we're half a foot candle over in a couple locations. Upgrade the customer order displays with a state-of-the-art digital sound system and automatic volume control. That's one of the first ones in the region. That was done. No architectural lighting on the yellow canopy. That's never was, so that's fine. Additional curb in lieu of striping. We did modify the curb in that area. Couldn't do as much as we'd first hoped because we had truck access issues, but we did modify the curb in that area. We went through deficient portions of the existing fence line will be repaired, upgraded to match the center portions, match the existing fence with 2x6 vertical and tightly spaced. On the McDonald's side, 1x6, that's done, not only done, but we got halfway through. The neighbors objected to one of the types of wood we used. And
Mr. Cozen, I would just want to stop you there. We don't, the city isn't in the business of enforcing or getting in the middle of memorandums of understanding between private entities. So I want to be fair to both sides and just say that I don't think we are able to really get into those details today.
Let me skip to the end then, if that's fine. I just want to say that we've complied with our part. There were, however, portions that the residents were obligated to do. One was withdraw their appeal, which they did. 2 were support the PDR building permit process for the project, which I'm not sure anybody can characterize what's going on as support, I guess. But most importantly, items 6 and 7 were that the residents were required to notify our on-site management of any concerns in writing before proceeding to the city and giving us the opportunity to restore the relationship and continue to make those corrections. And according to KSTP last night, there's been over 40 complaints, and we haven't received any of those. So
again,
I hear you.
we don't really have any ability, nor do we want to participate in enforcing memorandums of understanding between private entities. So are there any questions for the property owner here? Seeing none, I'll move along.
Can I have one quick close? Just wrap that up? Okay, thank you. I apologize. So in closing, I guess what we're asking for is a common sense application of the code. We built what we proposed. There was no bait and switch. We did not go above and beyond the variance. We'd like a common sense interpretation of how that height is done. We'd like the board, the committee, and ultimately the council to confirm the correct determination was made by Shanna Sether, the original planner on the project, and we complied with those requirements. Confirm that the discrepancy is in the determinations after construction. Determine the best point of measuring is back of curb immediately adjacent to the base of the sign, which would be natural grade at the curb as code requires. Confirm the height measured to the top of sign face area as outlined. We talked about that. Determine the approximate language in the variance allows for some minor adjustments. I'm not sure what that is, but the variance specifically says approximately 11 feet 6 inches or whatever the height is. And then ultimately, if those are true, determine all 5 drive-through signs are in compliance with the applicable variances in code, so we can move forward and finish this project up.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move now to the folks who've signed in for the public testimony. Unless there are any questions, there are none. So we have Dennis Jackson, Beth Forkenbrock, and Darren Lazen signed in. So Mr. Jackson, why don't we start with you? And please state your name and address for the record. And again, I know that there are likely issues regarding the memorandum of understanding, but today we want to stay focused on this sign issue.
Yes, honorable committee members, my name is Dennis Jackson. I reside with my partner Beth Forkenbrock at 308 12th Avenue Northeast, which is just to the north of the lots in question. Several years ago, I retired as building inspector, plumbing inspector, and city bylaw enforcement officer for a different city. So I am aware of some of the processes that involved in dealing with these things. I have dealt with large multi-billion-dollar corporations before, and I've noticed an arrogance that seems to stimulate from them regarding both city bylaws and the wishes of adjoining property owners. In judging the grade of the lot, every morning I look out the back window, I see a 2.5-foot retaining wall that was created by McDonald's in a previous construction. Not that they have changed the grade, but in order to figure a benchmark grade for the property, I wouldn't think that you would start at the high point of that, which has been artificially created in the first place. I really would like you to uphold the findings of your city officers and the bylaws or the laws that pertain to this particular situation. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Forkenbrock.
My name is Beth Forkenbrock. I reside at 308 12th Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis. My property is just to the north of the property in question, owned by the McDonald's Corporation. I have lived there for 40 years, long before McDonald's moved into the neighborhood. I would like to indicate my agreement with the items that were submitted by both Mr. Tim Kennedy and by Robert Riskin, neighbors of mine that submitted information for this hearing. And I would also like to request that the city make sure that the ordinances be complied with, that McDonald's be held liable for the fact that they are non-compliant to the ordinances, and that that McDonald's, because it's a large corporation, should still be in compliance. That my request is simply to hold them accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lazen? Oh, thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this issue? Come on up, and then please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tim Kennedy, and I live behind McDonald's also. You saw the papers that he brought up here, and they have all the numbers and everything, but you can't read the numbers. You look at it and you think, what is it? He's saying 11.9 is what's on there, but he asked for a variance for 10.3. Why would you ask for a variance for 10.3 if it's 11.9? I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, they can keep the signs, they're monument signs, I understand that. But the lettering, they took the lettering off so that they can be compliant. Okay. The menu boards are 81 inches. No matter where you measure them from, that's the size of them, 81 inches. That's not 6 feet. I mean, it can't be. It's, it doesn't come into it. I don't understand. I agree with the zoning administrator where they're measuring from. The councilwoman who was saying you could pull their variance. I think you can. You guys have that power. You granted it. You told us we want our appeal. They came at us and says, "Oh, what can we do to get the variance?" Be compliant. Follow the rules. That's all. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else for the public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and see if Mr. Poor would like to respond to some of the issues raised.
Chairman Bender, I just had one response to the appellant's testimony, and it came up at the Board of Adjustment as well. They're asserting that we said we weren't going to enforce the letter of law on the menu boards, and that he was told that by an inspector. And I sent an email the next day that said that's not the case. And we had a conversation about that with his staff. It's not the case. They were told immediately about that. So it's just not factually accurate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, so is there a motion? Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not only do I concur with the findings of staff and agree with the conclusion of the Zoning Board of Adjustments, I would like to state that it's probably good business to be a good neighbor. And when you have a special process set aside to achieve some goals, mutually shared goals, that the neighbors are going to want to follow to a T. And I think if there's a technical debate, that doesn't hold water. Just make the parties that have agreed to give you an exception happy. That should be good business. Even though it's immaterial to the discussion before us, it was stated in testimony, I'd like to refute the notion that this is the best commercial upgrade in the neighborhood. Just a block away, there's a series of commercial upgrades that not only are celebrated within our community and won regional awards, but the New York Times recognized the revitalization that took place. And I don't think $3 million of what you're trying to do at this corner will ever get the attention of the New York Times. So I just want to refute that, even though I know it's immaterial to the decision before. So I move to deny.
Thank you, Councilmember Reich. Is there any discussion on Councilmember Reich's motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And that carries. And that is the final piece of business today. I do just want to say that since this is our first meeting of the new year, just at the end of last year, we made an amazing milestone in the city of Minneapolis. The highest number ever of permits ever reached, and that was possible due to the extraordinary work of our staff. And many of them have left now, but Doug Kress leads that group, Mr. Wittenberg, Mr. Nielsen, all of the staff that walk all of our projects through are just so important to the success of our city. And I want to thank our staff and all of my colleagues here for serving the city in this way, and Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, I want to add to the compliments and you know, it is a great day in our city when we have this much development, but we also have key senior staff that have been involved in actually negotiating the deals that lead to this kind of development. So I want to also mention Mr. Chuck Lutz in that vein, and our great city attorney, Susan Siegel. They've been at the helm, Mr. Carpenter as well in finance. These things don't happen unless we have great people working in those very important places in our city. Thank you.
And with that, we are adjourned.